Good morning, and welcome to the Introduction to Basic Computers class. My name is Margaret Daly, and I will be your instructor for the next few weeks. We've already gone through some of our introductions and why some of you are here today. And I noticed on the registration form some of you were concerned about terminology, also what happens when you turn on your computer, what are the basic parts of the computer and how they work, and also how to use a mouse. So we'll be covering some of those topics within the next 2 weeks. You have to remember though, when you're using a computer for the first time, it's like learning a whole new language, and together we will learn it. This next picture you'll see is how I felt when I first used a computer. So I understand where a lot of you are coming from. I'm from the typewriter age and tried to avoid computers at all costs until that fateful day when we got a computer here at the library and I had to learn how to use it. I was petrified that I was going to hit a key and delete everything and I would blow up the computer. Since then, I have learned that it's very hard to delete anything, and it's basically a tool. So you can't blow it up. So this is how I now feel like when it comes to computers. I find they're a wonderful tool. And together we're going to go through all the basics of the computer, and so that you will feel comfortable when turning on your computer and using the internet and emailing and all the other great things that computers have to offer. So right now we're just looking at the cover page of our Introduction to Computers handout. If you can please turn to the next page, it gives you the table of contents and everything that we'll be covering in the next 2 sessions. If you could please turn to page 1, which is our computer diagram. So I'm just bringing it up here. So what we have on this particular page is all the parts of a computer. You have what is called your monitor. In this handout, you'll see the word Central Processing Unit, or CPU. This is actually your computer. This is where all the information is sent, and the CPU is the Central Processing Unit. It's actually a chip inside that box that processes the information. Also, you'll see in this particular handout is a picture of the mouse. And the mouse is, again, a handheld device, and it allows you to move your cursor around the screen. We also have a picture here of a printer, and some of you may or may not have seen what is called a modem or router. And this is usually when you have a wireless network. So some of you who have never used a computer before, or may have gone over to, a niece or nephew or grandchild, some of you may have seen this device, and that is called a modem or router. And that's how you connect to the wireless network, to the internet. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail a little later on. If you can please turn to page 3. I know some of you have asked, how does a computer work? So this is what this next handout is all about. So you have something called the term hardware. Hardware is any part of the computer system you can touch. So for example, the monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, all this is hardware. What is software? Well, software tells the hardware what to do. Have any of you ever used a cassette recorder before? Oh yes, I see some of you have. Well, think of the cassette recorder as being the hardware. You can touch it. And the tape is the software. So you put the tape in, and what happens? You press play, and you hear music as a result. So computers are kind of the same way. The hardware is there, and you need the software to tell the hardware what to do in order for something to work. And in this case, with the cassette recorder, you hear music. There are only 2 types of software out there. There's your application software, or the term apps. This lets you accomplish a task. For example, something called a web browser allows you to access the internet. To write a letter, that is called word processing. This allows you to create not only letters but signs, and you can even write a book using a word processing program. And also, what a lot of people love to use the computer for, or they like to play games. And this is also called an application software or an app. You've probably heard the term referred to when people use their cell phones. There is also the second type of software out there. It's called an operating system. And this controls the overall activity of the computer. For example, saving and printing. Windows XP, Windows 7, and Windows 8 are all examples of an operating system software. So that's it. Only two types of software: apps and your operating system. So what are the basic parts of a computer? What makes up a computer? Well, you have the most important, which is called the console, the CPU, case, tower. This is your computer. You have your monitor, your keyboard, and the mouse. We're just going to look at what the console, case, tower, CPU, those are all terms that are referred to the computer. Well, it's that box, and that contains all the components that make the computer work. Just going to turn to the next page. Again, the console is the computer. Everything else is a much needed accessory. So, well, what is a monitor? Well, the monitor shows the information or the stuff on the screen which is formed by the computer. The glass part of the monitor is the screen or the display, and the monitor refers to the hardware. Well, what is a keyboard? A keyboard allows you to communicate your thoughts with the computer. A keyboard has a switch under each key, and these electric switches form a code. Switches can be on or off. On is 1, off is 0. So when you type on the keyboard, the computer recognizes the ons 1 and off 0, which is the binary code. This is just terms that you'll need for Jeopardy. So when you type, the computer recognizes that for example, if you type the letter C, what is happening is one bit of information is going to the computer. And when you have 8 bits, it is called a byte. I know it's a lot of information right now, but we're going to go through more of this later on. So every time you press a key, a bit of information is sent to the computer. The computer has 4 main parts. You have something called input, processing, output, and storage. So that's a lot to take in. We've already covered so much so far, I know. Think of a food processor at home. You have carrots, and you have the food processor. So what you do, you input the carrots into the food processor, and it's the food processor's job to slice and dice those carrots. Well, the same way with the computer. You put information using your keyboard and your mouse, and that goes to the CPU, and the CPU slices and dices the information. And the result is you see something on your computer screen, or in the case of the food processor, you get chopped carrots. And then at one point you have the option either to use the carrots right away, or you can store them for later. And that's where the input, processing, and output and storage comes together, because you can actually save information. So an input device is anything you use to enter information into the computer. So for example, the mouse, the keyboard, some of you may have heard of scanners. These are all considered input devices. Processing, which is on page 5. Processing is the CPU, Central Processing Unit's job. The CPU is the main chip in the computer. It processes and manages the flow of data through the computer system. It communicates with the input, output, and storage devices. Output devices are the result of the input devices and the processing. Output devices display information. Output devices are the monitor, printer, and speakers. And storage devices hold information. So for example, hard drive, USB keys, and CD and DVDs are storage devices. And you may be asking, why are we going through all this? Well, because we're actually going to be saving information to the computer a little bit later on. So don't worry about it right now. We're just going to cover some of the basics right now. So think again of your food processor. You're putting information into the computer. An input device is your keyboard, your mouse. You're putting information in using those devices. The computer's job is to process that information, and the result you see is on your monitor or on your screen as an output. And from there, if you're in a word processing program, for example, Microsoft Word or WordPad, we'll be using WordPad in this course, you can save your letter to the computer, or you can take it away on something called a USB key, or you can save it to a compact disk. So if you look further down the page, on page 5, there's just a diagram on how everything works together. And for those of you who really want to find out more about how computer works, there's a great YouTube clip, and we'll be showing this during the break time. If you can please turn to page 6. How to turn on your computer. I know we're not there yet, but if you look in the middle of your page, you will see an arrow, and there's a circle. It always looks like a half circle with a little line. This is your on button. And these can be anywhere on your computer, because every computer is different. They are not uniform. So we'll be going through the different places where you can find it. A lot of times you will find it on the front. Sometimes you will find that same button or that same look on top of your computer, or even at the side. That's the great thing about computers. Sometimes there's always more than one way to look at it. And sometimes they are not round, the on buttons. Sometimes they are square or oblong. If you can please turn to the next page, which is page 7. I know some of you have asked what happens when you turn on your computer. I like to call it the Windows Sunday. So, you have your hardware. Again, hardware is anything you can touch. So your keyboard, your mouse, your monitor. Think of that as your Sunday bowl. Right now you have a very boring Sunday. You have just a bowl. You turn on your computer, and what happens is your first scoop of ice cream. This is called your BIOS, or your Basic Instruction Operating System. It checks to make sure, oh yes, keyboard is there, mouse is there, everything is a go. So you have your hardware, everything you can touch. And then your first scoop of ice cream, which is your BIOS, and it's making sure everything is running. Now comes your second scoop of ice cream. This is called your DOS, or your Disk Operating System. Back in the day, that's where it used to stop. Some of you may have remembered DOS, and you had to remember reams and reams of commands. Not very user-friendly. In comes Windows. Windows is like the chocolate sauce on top of your 2 scoops of ice cream. It is called a GUI interface. It uses pictures. You can use the mouse. It looks great. But you're still missing your nuts and your candy. And this is your last layer. And your nuts and your candy are your application software programs. For example, your games, your word processing programs, the tools that you use in order for your computer to work. So in summary, what happens when you turn on your computer? Well, first you have the hardware, everything you can touch. That's your Sunday bowl. Your first scoop of ice cream is your BIOS. And make sure, yep, everything is working great. In comes DOS, which is your second scoop of ice cream. Well, then comes Windows. Windows is the caramel sauce. This is called your GUI interface, and this is also known as your operating system. But in order to use your computer as a tool, you need your application software programs, or your apps. And these are the nuts and candy. So all these things together enable you to use your computer. So if you can turn to page 8, Introduction to the Desktop and the Desktop Icons. What we're going to do now is we are now going to leave the meeting room and go to the computer lab. So if you can follow me. Okay, great. Everyone is seated. So if everyone can please touch your keyboard. Great. Can everyone please touch your mouse? Fantastic. Can everyone please point to your monitor? Great. Okay, can everyone please find the on button? Good. Okay, so right now your computer is going through the series of checks. While it's doing that, can everyone please look at the computer? You will notice on your computer there's something that says DVD. Can you please press on that button? Yes, it does open, and it does look like a cup holder, but please do not put your cup of coffee there. This is called your DVD drive here at the library. So if you have a DVD, you could put a DVD in here and play a movie. You can also save information to a CD or a DVD. So how do you close it? You can just press on the button again or lightly tap. Okay, great. Now that the computer is turned on, you are now looking at the screen. And on the screen, the correct term is called desktop. So this is on the page 8 of your handout, Introduction to Desktop and Desktop Items. So right now you've turned on your computer, and what you're looking at is called your desktop. This is like your desk at home. Everyone's desk is a little different. Some people are very neat, and some people have papers everywhere. Your desktop will look different from what we're looking at, or even in the example in the handout. Like all desks, they're very personal. Think of your computer as a car. They're all a little different, but have the same similarities. For example, a steering wheel. So, on your desktop, there are these little pictures, and these pictures are called icons. Icons are pictures that represent different programs or apps or files. So we're just going to look at the screen again. What you're looking at is called your desktop, and on your desktop there are pictures, and the pictures are called icons. And these represent different programs, and they also represent sometimes files. You can also save information to your desktop. At the very bottom of your screen you will see the start button, or some of you may even see it looks like a circle with a flag. That's the Windows symbol. That is called your start button. This is how you access the start menu. The bottom bar beside the word start is called your taskbar. So at the very bottom of your desktop there's something called the taskbar. And in the right hand corner of your screen where you see the date and time, that is called your system tray. So again, when you turn on your computer, what you're looking at is called your desktop. On your desktop there are pictures, and the pictures are called icons. And these are shortcuts to some of your programs. At the very bottom of your screen there is the start button and the taskbar and the system tray. You can please turn to page 9. This is how to hold the mouse. So if everyone can please put your thumb and your little finger on the sides of the mouse, and the rest of the palm just below the buttons. And if you can please place your index finger on the left mouse button, and if you can please place your middle finger on the right mouse button. What I'd like you to do is to move your mouse pointer up the screen so you push the mouse away from you. To pull the mouse arrow down the screen, pull the mouse towards you. And if you'd like to move to the left of the screen, move your mouse to the left, and then if you can move your mouse to the right. Great! It looks like everyone has got a great handle on that. What we're going to be doing next, thanks to the Palm Beach County Library, they have created a fabulous tutorial called Mousing Around Mousercise. For those of you who have never used the left mouse button, you will be an expert at it by the time we're finished this exercise.